Hello everyone, welcome to episode 13 of FanFic Breakdown. I'm your host SmashKing24. This is a series where we do video reviews on Super Smash Bros. And other Nintendo related fanfictions coming into your archive. Today's story is Crown of Ruin, a Super Smash Bros. AU story written by Ginta x Alvis Forever. It was written and completed over the course of 2016. The story features Cloud, Corrin, and Bayonetta as the main characters. I'll start us off with just a simple summary of the plot as given by the original author herself. Cloud was just a mercenary that resorted to thievery when the job went sour. Bayonetta was a witch in disguise of a pauper waiting for a chance to go wild on the humans she looked down on. The two would cross paths, often in the city of Izumo. Things would change for the both of them when the ruler of the neutral faction, Mikoto, ends up dead, and the main suspect is her only son, Corrin. Seeing this as an opportunity, both jump to protect the scared prince, unaware of the politics going on behind the scenes. Now, unlike the previous episodes that we've done, where we kind of follow a sequential order of going through the plot, the characters, setting, and theme, I'm going to go over the plot, the characters, and the setting at the same time as we go through the story. Since this story, it's one of the longest stories I've ever read, with a word count of up to nearly 200,000. Now, the important thing to understand about this story is that, first of all, yes, it is an alternate universe story, but it is an alternate universe story that takes place in Fire Emblem Fates' universe. So, we're going to do a little bit of world building here. If you've not played Fire Emblem Fates, Birthright, Conquest, or Revelation, I can say that, especially Revelation, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in both the story and the review for what happens in Fire Emblem Fates. And it should also go without saying that there's going to be a lot of spoilers for what happens in the story itself, since I'm going to be going through, and trust me, the story is long, there are a lot of spoilers, so keep that in mind. I'm probably going to be covering the first two arcs of the story. There's 3 arcs in total, but I'm going to be pretty much talking about the first 2 of them. One thing I have to say about this story before we get into it is that it is a rated M story that has a lot of explicit content in it. There's a lot of sexual innuendos, there's a lot of rape implications, there's a lot of torture scenes. It's not for the faint of heart, so I'm going to say that right away. If you're not really into that, then you might not want to listen to this or watch this review, because I will be mentioning some of that stuff. And even the story itself, it can get pretty graphic. So that all being said, the story takes place in what we refer to as the Invisible Continent. Now, the Invisible Continent is basically where Nor and Hoshido and Izumo are situated. Now, for those who don't know much about the Fire Emblem Fates or haven't played the game, the basic story of Fire Emblem Fates is that you have 2 warring kingdoms, Hoshido and Nor. Hoshido is portrayed to be the good guys, Nor is portrayed to be bad guys, and they're basically 2 warring kingdoms. They both have 2 royal families consisting of 4 children that kind of lead their nation to battle, and they both hate each other, and it's up to Corrin, who is the birth child of the queen from Birthright's game, but the raised, adopted son of the king from Conquest game. It's up to him to kind of reunite the kingdoms and to stop the war and to put an end to all this hatred and whatever. That's what he does. That's basically what the information you're given at the beginning of Fire Emblem Fates going into it. The same thing stands in this story. You've got Hoshido, you've got Nor, you've also got Izumo, which is a kingdom that sits smack dab in the middle of Hoshido and Nor as a neutral kingdom where no wars take place, there are no conflicts. If anyone from Nor or Hoshido was to show up in Izumo, they are told to not take up arms, not to fight, everything's fine, all's good. Here's where the story differs from the game. Queen Mikoto is the queen of Hoshido in Birthright, canonically. In this story, she's the queen of Izumo. The king of Hoshido, who is supposedly dead in the beginning of Fire Emblem Fates, is actually alive in this story, King Sumeragi. So he's the king of Hoshido, King Garen is the king of Nor, the royal siblings are still serving under their father in their respective nations, all that's fine. The main difference here is that Mikoto is the queen of Izumo, Corrin is her blood child, so he's the prince of Izumo. What happens in this story is King Garen of Nor and King Sumeragi of Hoshido want to marry Mikoto so that they can take Izumo and merge it with their own kingdom, basically to give them an edge over the other should a war ever break out. Mikoto is kind of she's in the middle of not being sure which side she wants to go with, and that's pretty much the predicament that she finds herself in. Corrin's her son, and he's the king of Izumo, and he's lived a very sheltered life, so he doesn't go outside, and he has his retainers, Gunter and Flora. Now that's another thing that's different from the games, is that Gunter and Flora do not live in Nor anymore, they live in Izumo, and they are Corrin's respective retainers in Izumo. He grew up in a castle, or in a pagoda, whatever it is, most of his life. He doesn't have any friends, and he's very insecure, and he's kind of a wimp. that's really all there is about him in the beginning. So we established this, that Cloud and Bayonetta are living in Izumo. Bayonetta just has a shop that she runs on her own, and Cloud is a thief that sees her as a business partner. They kind of work together to help each other out. Cloud bumps into Corrin randomly in the middle of the street on accident. He doesn't recognize him, of course, because it's Corrin and he's dressed up in a cowl or something. And it's from there we learn that there's supposed to be a banquet that takes place in the pagoda, in like Izumo's pagoda thing, which is like basically their giant castle. Not their castle, it's a pagoda. It's like they show in the games. It's the freaking tower thing. And all of the Hoshido and Nor siblings are supposed to show up there for this banquet because it's supposed to be basically, you know, everyone comes together. Basically, Mikoto has to choose who she wants to be married to, King Garen or King Sumeragi. Cloud and Bayonetta learn about this from a mysterious figure who enters their shop, so they end up going to the pagoda as well. Cloud more there kind of just to steal from the treasury if he can. But when they arrive there, they end up bumping into Corrin, and then Corrin gets all upset that they're basically they're trying to steal from him, and then they end up finding out that Mikoto is mysteriously murdered. It just happens. They open the door, and then she's lying dead on the ground in cold blood, and they don't know who it was. Immediately, Cloud becomes suspected of being the murderer because he's already wanted by the kingdoms for being a thief. And then this is where it gets a little bit weird. So you got Iago, who is named Macbeth in this story. All of the Fire Emblem characters have their names swapped into the Japanese versions of their name. So in this story, he's referred to as Macbeth, but I'm gonna call him Iago just because that's the way I know him the best. He's the exact same character. He's the same like sleazy scumbag tactician sorcerer dude that he is in Fire Emblem Fates. He comes in to the picture, and he is King Garen's right-hand man. But he's got one dark secret in this story that becomes really apparent really fast, and it's basically that he is obsessed with Corrin. His obsession can kind of be related to Camilla's obsession with him. If you've played Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, where Camilla kind of has this desire to be with him at all times. It's not really sexual with her, but she kind of makes it sometimes with the things she says. With Macbeth, it's entirely everything, like it's off the wall. Everything, he just Corrin. Like he wants his butt. Like he just wants Corrin all to himself, and that's it. There's like a scene where after Mikoto gets murdered, Macbeth goes up to Corrin, and then he tries to like pin him against the bed and then grab his thighs, and he's saying like, we can pin the whole thing on King Sumeragi or something, and then we can rule Izumo together like husband and wife or whatever. Husband and husband. He wants to like marry Corrin. Like that's kind of the thing. He wants to marry Corrin because he thinks that if he can marry Corrin, since Corrin is the prince, the crown prince of Izumo, he can essentially become the king of Izumo and then potentially merge Nor with Izumo or just rule it as a separate kingdom on his own with Corrin by his side. He says that, but we all know that he really just wants it because he wants Corrin's butt. That's pretty much Macbeth in a nutshell for the entire course of this story. So while Macbeth has Corrin in his clutches during this first arc, Gunter comes in and he tries to save Corrin. He sees that he's being assaulted by Iago, so he tries to stop him, but then Hans comes in and kills Gunter, and then Cloud comes in to kill Hans, but Hans somehow survives Cloud's attack. Cloud had just come in out of nowhere and seen that Corrin was under attack, so he grabs Corrin. They escape thanks to Bayonetta, who opens up a portal in the temple. They escape out into the city, and then all of a sudden, everyone is up in arms because Gunter's now dead, and Iago goes and pins the whole thing on Cloud. So now, basically, you've got Hoshido and Nor chasing after Cloud, and now that Corrin's with them too, they think that Cloud's holding him captive. So it's not good. It's not good at all, so they gotta run. Corrin barely even knows Cloud too at this point. He's just like, why are you helping me? And then Cloud doesn't even know why he's doing it. He kind of just did it as a spur-of-the-moment thing. It's like, okay, we have to get out of here, so you're coming with me. He kind of did it as a way to take him as a hostage too, so that if he were to be caught somehow, he would at least have Corrin there, so he could use him as a threat, you know. So they end up escaping into the Seventh Heaven bar, which is the bar that Cloud's friend Tifa runs. Now this Tifa is the exact same Tifa that is from Final Fantasy VII. She's pretty much the exact same character. It's all cool. They meet the Avalanche crew, which is also from Final Fantasy VII. You've got Barret, and you've got Jesse, and you got like Biggs and Wedge. They're all there, and they get surrounded by Nourian soldiers. There's a fight that breaks out outside the bar where they basically have to try and fend off the soldiers. It's a really cool scene because you end up seeing Xander show up on his horse, and he's got Perry and Laszlo with him. Laszlo and Perry basically go in and they just murder the guys from Avalanche. And even though Perry is a minor character in this story, I think the way she was portrayed in this one small scene that takes place in the first arc, I thought it really captured the character that the original game was trying to establish with her, but never really could, because, you know, in Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, how many people do you actually kill? Corrin says that you don't actually kill anybody in the cutscene, so Perry never really gets to shine as you would expect her to be this crazy maniacal character that just wants to kill everybody. Anyways, they take that opportunity to escape again. Corrin learns that he can transform into a dragon because he had taken a dragon stone from the treasury. So Cloud gets on him and then they escape to Vala. Or it's with Bayonetta's help they manage to escape to Vala. Now what is Vala exactly? Vala is a fourth kingdom on the invisible continent. You know how we said there was a Hoshido, there's a Nor, and there's an Izumo? Well, underneath all that, there is a fourth kingdom. Like an underground, it's kind of like underground, I guess. Like in Skyrim, when you had like those dwarven cities that were underground. Like you have cities that are underground, and this is one of them. It's called Vala, and it has a king known as Anankos. It is here in the kingdom of Vala where they learn that Corrin actually had a twin sibling the whole time, known as Kamui, who is, of course, the female Corrin that you can play as in Fire Emblem Fates. It's here where we also get to meet Azura and Volga as well, who is a character from the Legend of Zelda Hyrule Warriors series. We learn in Vala that Anankos is a dragon, and he is also Corrin's real dad, and Kamui is his older twin sibling. Wow. Yeah, so it's surprising to him because all his life he thought that he was the only son of Queen Mikoto. He never met his real dad. But it turns out that at some point in time, Anankos and Mikoto gave birth to twins. That was it, and then Anankos took Kamui to Vala and hid underground, and then Mikoto took Corrin to Izumo and raised him in the overworld. Now, why is that? Well, apparently there was some kind of war that took place like 18 years ago or something between like witches and stuff, and then Anankos did like something bad, so he lost another one of his daughters who was known as Lilith, and then she was killed, and then he ended up just hiding here because he was afraid that something bad was going to happen to Kamui, so he just basically sat down here and he raised Kamui and looked over the other good people of the Vala Kingdom, or the Valite Kingdom, whatever it's called. And it was in this exact same war that Bayonetta lost a lot of her friends. It's not really mentioned in the beginning of the story, but the reason why Bayonetta is kind of just sitting as a tailor shop in Izumo by herself with Cloud is because she's kind of just like waiting for an opportunity to kill like all the humans on the invisible continent, and that's because she wants revenge for what happened to her clan like all those years ago when there was a war between... She had like all these friends who were all witches, and they were basically all killed in the war, and they weren't even just like flat out killed, they were freaking like tortured beyond belief by the humans, and that's pretty much what haunts her in her dreams. So she wants to seek out revenge on the humans that did this to her, but not just the humans that did it to her, but basically everybody, because she hates everyone. Even though she comes off as someone who's pretty level-headed and cool in the story, she has these kind of dark feelings hidden away that she kind of keeps to herself. Now, as for the reason why Cloud is kind of along with them on this journey, after he learns that Corrin is a water dragon, quote-unquote, the water dragon is basically the dragon that is used to restore life. In the lore, there's like these there's like 6 dragons, like a fire dragon and a water dragon and an earth dragon, whatever. All these dragons, they have mystical powers, and they're like kind of like gods in a way. And Anankos is one of them. And since Corrin is Anankos' son, Cloud thinks that he can take Corrin and bring him to the outer continent where he lives. The outer continent is separate from the inner continent, or the invisible continent. It's kind of like where everything else in the universe is, like Midgar, Hyrule, those are all on the outer continent. Cloud thinks that by taking Corrin to the outer continent, he can save his hometown of Midgar, which is currently polluted due to the Shinra Power Electric Company and all their creations. So that's basically Cloud's reason for doing all of this, despite the fact that he was originally a thief who was in Izumo. He was kind of stranded here, which is why his only friends were Tifa, Barrett, and everyone else that he brought with him from Avalanche, because they were all sent here on a mission to find the water dragon and became stranded. So now that he has Corrin with him, he thinks that he can take him and then leave. Eventually, in Vala, they meet up with some strangers that have come from the outer continent. We are introduced to Shulk, Ava, Nyx, and Tiki. Shulk is Shulk from Xenoblade Chronicles. Ava is a pink-haired male Robin OC from Fire Emblem Awakening, but it's not the same as Robin from Fire Emblem Awakening, because that Robin is actually the king of Pelagia in this story. They also meet Nyx, and she's basically the same Nyx from Fire Emblem Fates. Nothing to really say, that she's older than she appears, and she's a black mage. And then you got Tiki, who is also some kind of dragon with mystical powers. They come together to return to Izumo so that they can free Flora, Tifa, and Barret. So what happened after they fled Izumo? Flora got captured, Tifa got captured, and so did Barret. So Iago basically says, we're gonna put these people on public execution unless you come back here and stop us. So they go and do that, and it's from doing that that Iago learns that Corrin actually had a sister the whole time. And because he sees that Corrin has a sister, he suddenly becomes like interested in her and he wants her, even though he was originally interested in Corrin. He's still interested in Corrin throughout the entire course of the story, but every time he sees Kemu, he's like, ooh, is like there's a female version of him and she's very pretty, and he wants her too because he's a freaking creep. I don't know why. He just wants them both because he is sexually deprived. That's really the only reason why he does anything in this story, honestly. It's kind of sad. So they go to Izumo, they save Flora, Tifa, and Barret, they bring them back to Vala, they just go back to Vala because it's safe there, and they can kind of just do whatever, even though Corrin is still trying to figure out who the murderer for his mother was. Like, that's what they're all doing in the overworld. But in the meantime, Corrin is kind of just like taking the time to learn how to use the sword that he found. He found his Yedo sword, and he doesn't know how to use it though because he's not a swordsman in this story. Corrin is actually a healer, and he's given a staff to show that he is a healer, so he needs to learn how to use his sword. That's pretty much what he does here in Vala while he's staying here. At the same time, Corrin, Cloud, and Bayonetta end up meeting up with the Nankos again, and then he gives them this power that grants them super enhanced abilities. So they might have enhanced like healing or enhanced strength or agility. That's great, you know, like what a great guy to give them powers. There is one catch, and the catch is that they have to form a sex pact with each other, and I can't even say that with a straight face. Bayonetta, Cloud, and Corrin have to agree with the Nankos to basically become sex buddies in order to accept the pact. Now, what that means is, in order to use the powers that a Nankos grants them, they need to partake in sexual activities with one another. So whether that's flat out just the act of having intercourse, or maybe, you know, a quick BJ on the side, you know, whatever, that's that gives them the powers. Like, that all worked. It's kind of like, you know how in Fire Emblem Fates they had like the support thing. If you got a C support, a B support, the stronger your support was with your partner, the more stat boost they would give you when you're paired up. You know, it's kind of like that, except instead of, you know, walking into your partner and being like, oh yeah, how's it going? And you're learning about them and how they are as a person, they basically have to go and bang each other. That's pretty much what they do. Like, they have to do in the story. And it's very awkward when Nankos gives it to them. Even he knows that this is really weird. And then Ian Corrin's just like freaking out. He's like, well, what the hell is this? And then it's like, oh no, it's totally fine, you know, because your sister did it with Azura and Volga. You have to have a threesome. That's the rule. You can't just pick one person and have this pact with them. You need 3 people. You need to have a man and a woman, at least, because if you're heterosexual or bisexual or whatever, like, it needs to work regardless of your sexual orientation. So, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. So he gives them this pact, and we don't really get to see them use it over the course of the whole story. They do use it to kind of regen their stamina after some encounter that they have in Vala. They use it. Like Cloud and Bayonetta do use it. There's like a scene that's excluded from the fanfiction.net version, but included in the archive of our own version, because that's apparently allowed there, where we get to read about an actual sexual act taking place between Cloud and Bayonetta in a bed. By the time that this story ends, they've used this pact maybe 2 or 3 times. Not each, just like overall. So it doesn't really give them as much of a benefit as you think it would, because of the fact that they have to essentially do it with each other. And it's not like any of them have feelings for each other at this point either in the story. They kind of just be like, okay, fine, yeah, we'll do it, whatever, just like get on with it, old man. That's pretty much what they say. Eventually we learn more about Bayonetta's past. Her clan gets wiped out by humans. We learn that she had her friend Celine had this item that allows them to look into the past. So Corrin and Bayonetta set off on a mission to go find the item that's somehow in Vala, so they can just go and look for the item. It's some kind of like crystal ball or something that lets them look into the past, and the idea is that if they find it, Corrin can use it to find out who his mother's killer was. But the only thing that it really does, that this sequence does for them, is they go and they find it. Corrin gets overtaken by the dragon within him. He becomes basically a sexual beast that wants to assault Bayonetta when they're alone. But then he gets stopped by like Cloud or some soldiers that come in, and they manage to save her. And that kind of leads into how Bayonetta and Cloud end up having sex because she's tired. And they don't even end up really using that item when they find it anyway. So later on, while Cloud and Bayo are busy, Corrin and Kamui go to use one of the portals that Bayonetta set up to go to Izumo to go find Mikoto's killer. and Flora also goes with them. Then eventually what happens is Cloud and Bayonetta do catch up with them, but then they end up being betrayed in Izumo by Flora, because the whole time Flora was actually against them. It is at that point where they do learn about Mikoto's killer, like the true identity of this killer. And then at this point, Corrin gets brainwashed by Iago, and he gets captured, and then yada yada it goes in. Then it basically becomes a mission to save Corrin from Iago and escape the continent before Vala gets invaded by Hoshido and Nor, because if Anankos gets killed, the whole invisible continent falls down, and then everyone dies. So that basically covers the first half of the story. I basically summarized the whole thing in this entire video. Now, some things that I can say about this story. We have a lot of characters coming from different video games, most of which just come from Fire Emblem Fates. We've got Xander, we've got Ryoma, we've got Corrin, we've got all the royal siblings, we've got some of the royal retainers, like we've got Niles and Odin, like they do make appearances, so do Izana and Setsuna. The overall impact of the Fire Emblem characters that aren't Corrin, Kamui, or Iago don't really affect this story at all. They're kind of just there along for the ride trying to solve the mystery. You would expect there to be more Super Smash Bros. Characters in this story for the fact that it is categorized as a Super Smash Bros. Story, but you would be surprised to hear that it in fact does not have that many of them. There are over 50 characters from actual video game franchises that make appearances in this story, but less than 10 of them, like, not even come from, but are just like in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. You got Corrin, you got Cloud, you got Bayonetta, you got Shulk, and then I think Pit appears in like one chapter and just some kind of like through some kind of like mind link talk they do. You've got Ava, who is an OC that looks like Robin, so I don't even know if that even counts. And then there's some memories that Cloud has of Link, who is dead, but that's about it. There's not really any other character from Smash that appear in this story, which is kind of a letdown because it is categorized as a Smash Bros. Story. So unless you know about Fire Emblem Fates, unless you know about Disgaea, the Witch and the Hundred Knight, characters from those games do appear in this story and actually have a bit more plot relevancy compared to a lot of the Fire Emblem characters. Unless you know those games or those characters and what they've done in their games, it's going to be a lot to wrap your head around. The author doesn't give us everything in one plate, which is great. It's not just like, this is the entire story, this is the lore, like memorize it, learn it, and then it'll make sense. She kind of gives it to us as we go through. It's like, okay, why is Cloud doing this? It's like, oh, okay, that's the reason why he's doing it. It's like, hey, why is Bayonetta, why does she have so much resentment? It's like, okay, this is the reason why. She does like these flashback things. And we learn about it as we go through the story. That's great. The thing is, there is a lot of things that you need to consider while you're reading this story. In terms of the backstory, like the universe itself, how everything is kind of conjoined together. Like, it's not enough to know the story behind Fire Emblem Fates, because that story that took place in Fire Emblem Fates never happened. Hoshido and Nor, they were never at war. There's some kind of hints at war over the course of this story, but nothing ever really happens with them having war. A lot of the time, Hoshido and Nor are actually working together in this story, so who knows if they're even at war. So the main thing that you have to understand when you're reading this story is to just enter it with an open mind and just be prepared to take a lot of stuff in as you're reading, and be prepared to remember a lot of that stuff while you're reading. Because a lot of the times the author will refer back to a certain thing that happened or occurred, or something that happened or occurred that wasn't mentioned in the text but the characters knew about, and the reader was somehow supposed to know about it even though it didn't actually happen. And the narrator also has a part to play in all of this. The narrator is third-person narrator, but even with that in mind, a lot of stuff in the text is omitted because it tries to tell the story from Corrin's point of view, even though it's already a third-person narrator. An example of this you can see in the first arc where Corrin meets the characters from Avalanche. Not a lot of detail is given to the characters from Avalanche, even like, you know who Barret and Tifa is? So if you already know who they are, then it's really not so bad, but it's like no details are given. It's like, oh, Biggs and Wedge, they're just these like, this big guy and this like thinner guy that are just there, and they've got like guns or something, but he doesn't know what they are. Like, that's about it. Like, there's really no detail that's given. It's because Corrin, he doesn't really want to look at them because he's intimidated, he doesn't want to see them. But that kind of makes it more like those characters come off as they're not important. They're just death fodder that are going to get killed in the next paragraph. It's kind of like sitting in the middle here, where you've got a third-person narrator that is all-knowing, but yet holds stuff back from the reader because we're trying to tell it from Corrin's point of view. If you're going to do it from Corrin's point of view, do it as a first-person narrator from Corrin's point of view. You don't need to do it from a third person. Another thing that's kind of weird is that in the writing prompt that inspired this story was actually inspired by a prompt on Tumblr featuring 3 characters. One is a thief, one is a pauper, and one is a like a prince or a princess or someone of royalty that end up coming together in order to protect the prince or the princess character. So it does have that theme going in. The thing is, in the prompt, it mentions that one of the characters, the thief specifically, is supposed to have kleptomania, which is an urge to steal or take things without fully knowing or fully caring if it's going to profit them in the future or not. So basically, think of somebody who just wants to take things and then he doesn't care what it is, he just wants to take them. Kind of like a hoarder in a way, he just wants to take things. Not really hoarder though, because he might not keep it, he just wants to take things. That's what Cloud is supposed to be. That's not really enforced at all in this story, despite that. So Cloud's kind of just being a thief is just him more or less being a person without a job. That's kind of what he's doing, because he has a purpose in the story. He's trying to get Corrin and bring him out of the continent so he can save his town. It's just that this thing about him that is supposed to be true is never really enforced. As for the writing itself, I can say for sure that this story is above average in terms of quality, but a lot of the stuff that is, the way that the story is told can become very monotonous by the end of it. The tone of the story pretty much remains the same. It's not very expressive or anything really stands out. It's basically, the narrator will explicitly state everything that is going on, even the thoughts in the character's head at any given point in time. The same words tend to be used a lot of the time when giving specific details. When characters speak, they're almost always referred to by their hair color, which can be kind of annoying to read over and over again. Characters are always going to be like snarling or hissing at each other whenever they don't agree with something that another character says. The word choices that are used are very limited. Like, that's pretty much it though. Like, the writing is just alright, and nothing super spectacular really stands out about it. The characters though, I can say for sure that they're great. I pretty much liked every character that I read about in this story, since they were very close to their original canon counterparts, and if they weren't, then I was okay with them. The only character I can't really say I care much for is Corrin, and it's mainly because he suffers from the same thing that Corrin in Fire Emblem Fates suffers from, and it's the whole, like, people like and care about him despite the fact that he doesn't really do anything. I mean, sure, he can turn to a dragon, sure, he's a prince, sure, he's a nice guy, but whenever it comes to any kind of conflict, he's pretty much useless in any situation. Like, he's a healer too. Like, he doesn't even have a sword in this story, and he doesn't even use his sword until the very end, and even then he can't even stop the main villain by himself. He doesn't have any balls. He's just a weak character in general. I mean, he doesn't have the complex backstory that Bayonetta has, where she's conflicted with these feelings of she wants to destroy the humans for what they've done to her clan. She doesn't have the same conflict with Cloud, where he thinks he's falling in love with Bayonetta, but he doesn't know if it's a good idea because she's his business partner. Corrin is kind of just stuck in the middle of, I'm an adolescent teenager, and sometimes I get really hot when I stand next to Bayonetta, and I really hate that Iago dude. So for me, that kind of just spells he's a weak character, and the story would have been much more interesting, I think, if we had followed it through the eyes of Kamui, who is Corrin's sister. Kamui, in this story, she is basically Corrin in Fire Emblem Fates, like his actual personality in Fire Emblem Fates, and she does a great job. Like, she's strong, she's a good fighter, she has a level head, and she's cool. Like, she has all this stuff. And sure, she's a bit naive too, because she grew up in Vala, you know, her whole life with her dad. She basically is the Corrin from Fire Emblem Fates, but she's more of all of his positive traits, unlike the Corrin in this story, who is basically, like, he's just a wimp. So reading about him and all the stuff that he's going through can be kind of like, ugh, it's not really interesting to read about, because by the end of the story you're going to be like, holy crap, how has this guy not been killed or captured yet by Iago? Any final thoughts? The theme that the author was going for, I believe, it's either a theme of friendship, a theme of love, or a theme of betrayal, because all three of those things do have an impact on the characters over the course of the story. You've got Corrin being unsure of who he wants to be friends with Cloud and Bayonetta, if he can trust them because he lived a sheltered life. You've got these feelings of love and lust between Iago and Corrin, and then Bayonetta and Cloud, and then Corrin and Bayonetta and Cloud, and then Tifa and Cloud, and then Azura and Kamui, and then Volga and Kamui and Azura, and Ava and Shulk, and Leo and Corrin, and Niles and Corrin. There's a lot of love going around in this story. As for betrayal, there's a lot of that takes place in this story. We see it with Iago, we see it with Flora, we see it with a few other characters that I haven't even mentioned yet. I believe betrayal is a pretty big theme in this story, so those would be some things I would say to keep in mind as you're going through. Overall, Crown of Ruin is without a doubt one of the weirdest stories I've ever read, but it's also one of the most interesting. because it offers a lot of character diversity in the sense that you've got all these characters that are trying to just work together in the middle of this conflict, and everyone's always doing something when something else is going on. Like while Corrin and CloudxBayonetta are in Vala, you've got Xander and Ryoma in Hoshito and Noor trying to figure out how to get to him. You've got Iago plotting something devious behind the scenes. It's actually pretty cool. I could see this totally being something you would see in like a like if this was some kind of spin-off anime featuring Fire Emblem Fates and, you know, The Legend of Zelda Hyrule Warriors and whatever, all that stuff. It could be really cool. I would not recommend this for anyone who is expecting a full-on Super Smash Bros. Story though, because it is not very inspired by Super Smash Bros. It is mostly inspired by Fire Emblem Fates and other related JRPGs, because there's absolutely zero reference to Super Smash Bros. Outside of Cloud, Corrin, Bayonetta, and Shulk, and even at that point, none of them really represent Super Smash Bros. At its core. If you are interested in AU stories though, especially if you are into the Fire Emblem Fates universe, I would definitely recommend to check this story out when you get the chance. So that was Crown of Ruin by Ginta X Alvis Forever. I'll leave a link in the description so you can check it out yourself. It's certainly a story that you will never forget once you find that crown. I'm Smash King 24, signing off. Happy smashing.